A teen janitor stood up to a bully attacking a disabled kid, but the next week, he's called to the principal's office for something he never expected. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Mike Reynolds glanced at the cheap watch on his wrist as he scrubbed a particularly stubborn scuff mark on the floor of Westridge High's main corridor. 5:30 already. If he didn't finish soon, he'd miss visiting hours at the hospital. Again. He pressed harder with the mop, his muscles aching from the day's work. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the freshly cleaned floors. The school was nearly empty now, most students and teachers having left hours ago. Just how Mike preferred it. Being invisible was safer. His mind drifted to yesterday's disappointment, arriving at the hospital 10 minutes after visiting hours had ended, seeing his mother's face through the small window of her room. Her smile brave but tired as a nurse explained he couldn't come in. Rules were rules, even for a son desperate to see his cancer-stricken mother. "Not today," Mike muttered, attacking the scuff mark with renewed vigor. "Not happening again." The sudden crash echoed through the empty hallway, followed by laughter and the unmistakable sound of a body hitting metal lockers. Mike froze, mop suspended mid-stroke. More laughter, another thud. Books scattering across the floor. He should ignore it. Get back to work, finish his shift and get to the hospital on time. Whatever was happening wasn't his business. Invisibility had been his strategy for the past 2 years. Head down, do the job, collect the paycheck that paid for his mom's chemotherapy. Getting involved only risked drawing attention, and attention could cost him everything. Mike carefully wrung out his mop and placed it in the bucket, trying to block out the sounds from around the corner. He had almost convinced himself to walk the other way when he heard a quiet sob. Something inside him snapped. He rounded the corner and immediately assessed the situation. Brad Thompson, Westridge's football star, towered over a smaller boy struggling to collect scattered books from the floor. Danny Foster, freshman, cerebral palsy, used forearm crutches to walk. Mike had cleaned around the kid's desk after hours many times, noting the meticulously organized notebooks and advanced textbooks. "Why don't you crawl faster, cripple?" Brad taunted, kicking a textbook just as Danny's fingers were about to reach it. The book slid across the polished floor, stopping against the opposite wall. 2 of Brad's teammates stood behind him laughing. One pulled out his phone, apparently recording the humiliation. Danny's face was flushed with embarrassment, silent tears tracking down his cheeks as he struggled to balance on one crutch while reaching for his belongings. Mike felt the weight of consequences pressing down on him. Brad's father was Robert Thompson, the real estate developer who donated the new stadium and whose name adorned the science wing. The same man who sat on the school board and had the ear of everyone who mattered in administration. People like Brad never faced consequences. People like Mike, replaceable custodians working paycheck to paycheck, they were the ones who paid when they stepped out of line. Yet as he watched another tear slide down Danny's face, Mike remembered his mother's words from years ago. "Your character is what you do when nobody's watching, Mikey." But people were watching, and so was he. Mike took a deep breath and stepped forward. "That's enough, Thompson." The hallway went suddenly quiet. Brad turned slowly, surprise registering on his face before morphing into cruel amusement. "Well, look who it is," Brad smirked, glancing at his friends. "The janitor thinks he's playing hero." "It's custodial technician," Mike said evenly, moving to stand between Brad and Danny. "And I'm not playing anything, I'm telling you to back off." Brad's eyes narrowed. "You don't tell me to do anything, Reynolds. Don't forget your place." Mike bent down, never breaking eye contact with Brad, and picked up one of Danny's books. "My place right now is helping this student, which is more than you're doing." He handed the book to Danny. "You okay?" Danny nodded slightly, eyes wide with disbelief. Brad stepped closer, using his 2-inch height advantage to loom over Mike. "Careful, Reynolds. People like you are easily replaceable." The threat hung in the air, undisguised. Mike felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Brad was right. There were a dozen people who would take his job in a heartbeat. And without that job, his mother's treatment. But he didn't back down. "People like me?" Mike asked quietly. "You mean people with actual jobs? Who work instead of bullying kids half their size?" "Yeah, there are lots of us. That's why we're called the majority." Brad's face flushed red. He stepped forward, fists clenching, but one of his friends grabbed his arm. "Dude, not worth it," the friend muttered, nodding toward the end of the hallway. Mike followed his gaze. Ms. Martinez, the school counselor, stood watching the scene with interest, her arms crossed over her chest. She made no move to intervene, but her presence was enough. Brad stepped back, forcing a laugh. "Whatever, come on, guys, I'm bored with this special ed project." He deliberately bumped into Mike's shoulder as he passed. "This isn't over, Janitor," he whispered, low enough that only Mike could hear. The three athletes swaggered down the hallway, high-fiving as if they'd accomplished something worth celebrating. Ms. Martinez watched them pass, her expression unreadable, before disappearing into her office without a word. Mike turned his attention to Danny, who was still struggling to gather his scattered belongings while balancing on his crutches. He knelt down, collecting textbooks, notebooks, and pencils that had spread across the corridor. "Advanced Computer Science?" Mike raised an eyebrow as he read one book's title. "Pretty heavy stuff." Danny accepted the book with shaking hands. It's just something I like," he mumbled, clearly expecting mockery. "That's cool," Mike said, handing him more books. "Everyone should have something they're into." Danny looked up, studying Mike's face as if searching for the punchline. Finding none, he ventured, You didn't have to do that. Step in, I mean." Mike shrugged, aware of passing students watching the unusual sight of a custodian helping a disabled freshman. Some whispered behind their hands. Others stared openly. He focused on Danny instead. "Yeah, I did," he said simply. They finished collecting the books in silence. Mike helped organize them in Danny's backpack, making sure the weight was balanced so the boy could manage with his crutches. "Thank you," Danny said as Mike handed him the last notebook. His voice was so quiet Mike almost missed it. Then, a little louder, "Nobody's ever defended me before." Something twisted in Mike's chest, a mixture of anger at that fact and an uncomfortable awareness of how close he'd come to walking away himself. He adjusted the straps on Danny's backpack. "Well, now someone has," he said. Danny nodded, then maneuvered himself and his crutches down the hallway, the incident already attracting less attention as students returned to their own dramas and concerns. The brief moment of connection faded, replaced by the reality of Mike's situation. His hands trembled slightly as he returned to his mop and bucket. What had he just done? 2 years of careful invisibility, of doing nothing to risk his crucial income, and he'd thrown it away on an impulse. If Brad decided to complain to his father... Mike checked his watch again and swore under his breath. Now he was definitely going to be late to the hospital. He quickly gathered his cleaning supplies, wheeling the bucket toward the custodial closet at the end of the hall. A few last-minute stragglers gave him a wide berth, the normal invisibility of maintenance staff momentarily broken by something resembling respect in their glances. It wouldn't last, of course. By tomorrow, he'd be back to being part of the background noise of the school, just another adult to ignore. At least, that's what he hoped. The alternative, becoming a target for Brad Thompson and his powerful father, was too frightening to contemplate. Mike stowed his supplies in the closet and changed out of his work shirt, grabbing his backpack. He was halfway to the staff exit when he felt something in his pocket that hadn't been there before. Reaching in, he pulled out a folded piece of paper, official school letterhead. His heart sank as he read the crisp typed message. My office tomorrow morning. Principal Wilson. Mike Reynolds stood outside Principal Wilson's office, clutching the crumpled note in his sweaty palm. His heart hammered against his ribs like it was trying to escape. This was it. He was about to lose the job his family desperately needed, all because he couldn't stay invisible like he'd planned for these past 2 difficult years. He took a deep breath, wiped his palms on his faded jeans, and knocked on the door. "Come in." Principal Wilson's authoritative voice called from inside. Mike entered with his head bowed, shoulders hunched, already preparing his defense, or maybe his plea for mercy. But when he looked up, he was startled to find not only Principal Wilson behind his desk, but also Ms. Martinez and Mr. Geller, his former science teacher. "Sit down, Michael," Principal Wilson said, his expression unreadable. Mike noticed there was no anger in his tone, which was somehow more unsettling. Mike lowered himself onto the chair, perched on its edge like he might need to bolt at any moment. "Sir, about yesterday, I was just trying to help. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. Ms." Martinez smiled slightly. "That's exactly what we want to talk about, Michael. About how you helped when no one else would." Mike blinked, confusion replacing his fear for a moment. Mr. Geller was flipping through a folder, scanning its contents with interest. "You were one of our best science students before." Mr. Geller hesitated, looking up from the folder. "Before you started working full-time. Your grades were exceptional, particularly in biology and chemistry. You were on track for a science scholarship." Mike shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "That was a long time ago, sir." 2 years is hardly a lifetime, Michael," Principal Wilson said, leaning forward. "Ms. Martinez told me about what she witnessed yesterday. Standing up to Brad Thompson took courage." "I just did what anyone would do," Mike mumbled, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. "But that's just it," Ms. Martinez interjected. "No one else did. Several students and even a teacher walked past that situation. You were the only one who stepped in." Principal Wilson nodded. "Which made us look into your file more closely. Your grades dropped precipitously 2 years ago, around the same time you took this job. Care to explain why?" Mike stared at his worn sneakers, then looked up, meeting their eyes. What did he have to lose now? "My mom has leukemia," he said, his voice steady despite the familiar ache in his chest. "Dad left when I was 10. There's no one else. The medical bills..." He shrugged. "Someone had to pay them." A heavy silence filled the room. Mr. Geller closed the folder slowly. "And your dream of studying medicine?" Ms. Martinez asked softly. Mike gave a bitter laugh. "Dreams don't pay for chemotherapy." Principal Wilson exchanged glances with the others, then straightened in his chair. "Michael, we'd like to make you a proposal. Continue as a janitor part-time for the same salary you're making now. Use the rest of your time to return to your studies. The school will support your application for university scholarships." Mike stared at him, certain he'd misheard. "Why? Why would you do this for me?" "Because talents like yours shouldn't be wasted cleaning corridors," Principal Wilson replied simply. "And because this school should reward moral courage as much as athletic prowess or academic achievement." "We've already spoken to the head of maintenance," Ms. Martinez added. "He's willing to adjust your schedule to work around classes." "And I'd be happy to help you catch up in science," Mr. Geller offered. "You've missed a lot, but nothing you can't overcome with some extra work." Mike felt lightheaded. This couldn't be real. People like him didn't get second chances like this. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Ms. Martinez suggested with a warm smile. "Yes," Mike whispered, then cleared his throat. "Yes, thank you." After discussing the logistics of his new schedule and which classes he could join mid-semester, Mike left the office in a daze. The hallway was filling with students arriving for first period. Some gave him curious glances, the janitor out of place among the morning rush, not wearing his usual uniform. As he turned the corner toward his locker, he nearly collided with Brad Thompson and two of his teammates. Brad's easy smile vanished when he recognized Mike. "Watch where you're going," Brad snapped, deliberately bumping Mike's shoulder as he passed. "This isn't over, Janitor," he muttered, just loud enough for Mike to hear. Mike watched them saunter down the hallway, high-fiving a group of cheerleaders. The momentary elation from the meeting faded as reality set in. Brad wasn't going to forget yesterday's humiliation. And unlike Mike, Brad had power, connections, and nothing to lose. Further down the hall, Mike spotted Danny Foster at his locker, struggling to balance on his crutches while retrieving books. When Danny noticed Mike, he gave a small, timid wave. Mike nodded back, feeling an unexpected sense of connection with the freshman. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Mike attended 2 classes in the morning, feeling conspicuously older than his classmates, then changed into his custodial uniform for his afternoon shift. The contrast was jarring. One moment he was a student, being called on by teachers who now treated him as an equal. The next he was pushing a mop past those same teachers who barely acknowledged him. By the time Mike left for the hospital that evening, his mind was spinning with the day's developments. He found his mother asleep in her hospital room, the chemotherapy having drained what little energy she had. Her once thick brown hair, so like his own, was now just a few wispy strands against the pillow. Her skin had a gray pallor that frightened him more than he wanted to admit. "I got some good news today, Mom," he whispered, taking her thin hand in his. He told her about the meeting, about his second chance, pretending she could hear him. "Things might be looking up for us." She didn't stir, but he thought he saw a small smile touch her lips. The evening nurse told him it was the medication, but he chose to believe otherwise. The next morning, Mike arrived at school early, eager to get a head start on his studies before classes. As he approached the maintenance closet to store his backpack, an unpleasant smell hit him. The door was slightly ajar. Mike pushed it open and froze. His cleaning cart had been overturned, chemicals spilled across the floor. Bleach, floor cleaner, and disinfectant formed a toxic puddle that had already eaten through the finish on the floor. A perfect workplace accident waiting to happen. "Jesus," he breathed, quickly grabbing gloves and a respirator from the shelf. If anyone found this mess, if his supervisor saw the damage to the floor, he'd be fired on the spot, special arrangement or not. It took him nearly 40 minutes to clean up the spill and ventilate the closet. By the time he finished, his first class had already started. Mike hurried down the hallway, stopping short when he saw Ms. Martinez watching him from her office doorway. "Everything okay, Michael? You're late." "Fine," he lied. "Just had some extra work to do." She didn't look convinced, but nodded. "Don't make a habit of it. Your position here is unusual. Some will be looking for any excuse to say you don't belong." "I know," he said quietly. The day crawled by. In chemistry, Mr. Geller handed back quizzes, pausing at Mike's desk. "See me after class," he said, not unkindly. When the other students had filed out, Mr. Geller showed Mike his quiz, a disheartening 62%. "You've lost ground, but nothing we can't fix," the teacher said, pulling out a study plan he'd prepared. "Can you meet twice a week after school for extra help?" "I have to work." Mike started, then remembered his new schedule. "Yes, I can do that. Thank you." In the cafeteria at lunch, Mike sat alone at a corner table, reviewing the study materials Mr. Geller had given him. He was so absorbed that he didn't notice Danny approaching until the boy set his tray down across from him. "Can I sit here?" Danny asked, already seated, his crutches propped against the table. Mike looked up, surprised. "Sure." They ate in awkward silence for a few minutes before Danny spoke again. "Are you really back as a student now? Everyone's talking about it." "Part-time," Mike clarified. "I still have to work here too." "That's cool." Danny said, his voice earnest. Like a secret identity or something. Student by day, janitor by also day. Mike couldn't help but laugh. Not exactly the superhero origin story I'd have chosen. Across the cafeteria, Brad and his friends were watching, occasionally glancing their way and laughing. Danny followed Mike's gaze and his smile faltered. Sorry, I'm probably not helping your social status. I'm a 19-year-old janitor, taking classes with kids 2 years younger than me, Mike said dryly. I don't think I had a social status to ruin. That evening, after his maintenance shift and a productive study session with Mr. Geller, Mike was exhausted, but hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, this crazy arrangement could work. He could gradually catch up on his studies, keep paying for his mom's treatment, and eventually apply for those scholarships. He was so lost in thought that he almost missed the small group of football players loitering near the staff exit. They fell silent as he approached, watching him with undisguised hostility. How's the cleanup crew, Reynolds? One called out. Find any interesting messes today? Mike kept walking, keeping his eyes forward, but their laughter followed him into the parking lot. As he reached his rusty old Honda, a hand-me-down from his mother, he saw what they'd been laughing about. Someone had keyed the driver's side door, carving a single word into the paint. Dead. As he ran his fingers over the jagged letters, Mike felt the fragile hope of the morning crumbling. This was just the beginning. Brad Thompson wasn't going to let this go, and Mike had just painted a target on his back. Friday morning, Mike slipped into school early, hoping to avoid any confrontations. He'd barely made it through the side entrance when Principal Wilson intercepted him in the corridor. Mr. Reynolds, I need to see you in my office Monday. First thing, he said, handing Mike an official memo. We have a serious matter to discuss. Mike felt the floor disappear beneath his feet. This was it. He was going to lose the job his family desperately needed, all because he couldn't stay invisible as he'd planned during these 2 difficult years. Mike frantically scrubbed at the threatening message on the wall, the harsh chemical smell burning his nostrils as he worked against time. Snitches Pay glared at him in bold chemical streaks, unmistakably created with the same cleaning solution he used daily. He needed to erase it before any administrators arrived, before his fragile second chance evaporated like the fumes rising from his cloth. Come on, he muttered, attacking the wall with renewed vigor. The message was fading, but not fast enough. His watch showed 6:45 a.m. Teachers would start arriving any minute. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Mike's heart hammered as he scrubbed harder, the muscles in his arm burning with effort. Michael? He turned to find Mr. Geller standing behind him, coffee in one hand and a stack of papers in the other. The science teacher's eyes moved from Mike to the half-erased threat on the wall. Mike started, then fell silent. There was no point lying. Mr. Geller set his things down on a nearby bench and approached the wall, examining the chemical residue. Who did this? He asked quietly. Mike shrugged. Doesn't matter. I've almost got it cleaned up. It does matter, Mr. Geller insisted, but his expression softened when he saw Mike's clenched jaw. But perhaps that's a conversation for another time. Let me help you. Together, they finished removing the message just as the first wave of teachers arrived. Mr. Geller squeezed Mike's shoulder before collecting his belongings. Stop by my classroom during lunch. I have something for you. Mike nodded gratefully and wheeled his cleaning cart away, keeping his head down as faculty members passed him in the hallway. Some nodded hello, more acknowledgement than he'd received during his 2 years of invisibility, while others looked through him as they always had. The morning dragged by. During history class, Mike found himself seated directly behind one of Brad's football teammates, who spent the hour sending texts and occasionally turning to glare at Mike. In English, a girl he vaguely recognized as a cheerleader whispered something to her friend, both glancing his way before giggling behind their hands. By lunchtime, Mike's nerves were frayed. He made his way to Mr. Geller's classroom, knocking softly before entering. The science teacher was at his desk, eating a sandwich while grading papers. He looked up and smiled, pointing to a nearby chair where a stack of textbooks sat. "Your personalized study plan," Mr. Geller explained, pushing the books toward Mike. "I've highlighted the chapters you should focus on first, with practice problems that align with our current curriculum." Mike flipped through the top book, Advanced Chemistry, noting the meticulous post-it notes marking important sections. "You didn't have to do all this, sir." "Consider it an investment," Mr. Geller replied, setting his red pen down. "The world needs more good doctors, especially ones who understand what it's like to struggle." Mike swallowed hard, touched by the teacher's unexpected faith in him. "Thank you. I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Mr. Geller said simply. "Now eat your lunch. Your brain needs fuel." Mike spent the remainder of his lunch hour in the science lab, alternating between eating his sandwich and attacking the practice problems Mr. Geller had assigned. The systematic logic of chemistry equations was soothing, a world where clear rules applied and every problem had a solution if you just applied the right formula. His afternoon shift began with cleaning the cafeteria. He moved methodically between tables, wiping down surfaces and sweeping floors, while using his free moments to mentally review chemical formulas. He was so absorbed in balancing a particularly challenging equation that he didn't notice Danny wheeling himself into the now empty cafeteria until the younger boy cleared his throat. "Oh, hey," Mike said, startled. "Shouldn't you be in class?" Danny shrugged. "Study hall. The librarian gave me a pass." He hesitated, then blurted out, "Are you good at math? I have a test next week, and I don't understand anything about trigonometric functions." Mike leaned on his broom, considering the request. "Math was always my best subject," he admitted. "But why ask me? Doesn't the school have tutors? They're all seniors who treat me like I'm 5 because of, you know." Danny gestured at his legs in the wheelchair. "You're the only person who talks to me like I'm normal." The simple honesty of the statement caught Mike off guard. He remembered how it felt to be an outsider, to be dismissed because of circumstances beyond his control. "I guess I could help," Mike offered. "I'm on break in 20 minutes if you want to stick around." Danny's face lit up. "Really? That would be awesome." True to his word, Mike spent his break at an empty cafeteria table, walking Danny through the basics of trigonometry. To his surprise, the younger boy caught on quickly, showing a natural aptitude for mathematical concepts despite his initial confusion. "Wait, so sin is just the ratio of the opposite side to the hypotenuse?" Danny asked, sketching a right triangle on his paper. "That's it? Why didn't my teacher just say that?" Mike smiled. Sometimes teachers forget what it's like not to know something. They've understood it for so long they can't remember what confused them in the first place. From across the cafeteria, Brad and a couple of his teammates emerged from the serving line, having gotten snacks from the vending machines. They stopped when they spotted Mike and Danny. "Well, look at this," Brad called out loudly. "It's the loser club meeting." His friends laughed on cue. Mike tensed, but kept his eyes on Danny's notebook. "Just ignore them," he said quietly. "Let's finish this problem." Brad wasn't deterred by their lack of response. He sauntered closer, his friends flanking him like bodyguards. "What's wrong, Reynolds? Too scared to look at me now that you're playing student again?" Brad leaned over their table, deliberately knocking Danny's pencil to the floor. "Or are you too busy with your little crippled friend?" Mike's jaw tightened, but Danny spoke before he could. "Actually, we're busy learning something you probably couldn't understand, Brad. It involves numbers with more than one digit." Brad's face darkened. "You think you're funny, Foster?" "No," Danny replied calmly. "Just smarter than you." For a moment, Mike thought Brad might actually hit Danny. Instead, the football player straightened up, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "You know what? You two deserve each other. The janitor and the cripple, Westridge High's biggest rejects. He glanced at Mike. Enjoy playing school while you can, Reynolds. It won't last. After Brad and his friends left, Mike stared at Danny in amazement. Where did that come from? I thought you were afraid of those guys. Danny shrugged but couldn't hide a small, proud smile. I guess seeing you stand up to them made me realize they're just sad. Like, what kind of person picks on someone in a wheelchair? Someone pretty pathetic. Mike returned to the hospital that evening, finding his mother awake and sitting up in bed, a good sign. Her smile brightened the sterile room as he entered. Michael, I was beginning to think you weren't coming. Just running late, he said, bending to kiss her cheek. How are you feeling today? Better, she said, though the dark circles under her eyes told a different story. The nurse said my counts are up slightly. That's good news. Mike pulled a chair close to her bed and told her about his new arrangement at school. He carefully omitted the threats and bullying, focusing instead on the opportunity he'd been given. Oh, Mikey, she said, eyes glistening. That's wonderful. You were born to be a doctor, just like... She stopped herself. Just like Dad, I know, Mike finished for her. It was a comparison she'd made often when he was younger, before his father had walked out on them, before they'd learned how easily promises could be broken. You're nothing like him, she amended quickly. You have his intelligence but your own heart. A much better one. Before leaving, Mike spoke with his mother's doctor in the hallway. The latest round of chemo was helping, but not as dramatically as they'd hoped. There was a newer, experimental treatment available, but insurance wouldn't cover it. The doctor mentioned a figure that made Mike's stomach drop. $3,000, he repeated, struggling to keep his voice steady. That's on top of what we're already paying? The doctor nodded sympathetically. I can put you in touch with some foundations that might help, but they often have waiting lists. That night, Mike counted his savings at the kitchen table of their small apartment. Between his custodial salary and what little they'd managed to save before his mother's diagnosis, they had less than half of what they'd need for the new treatment. Mike pulled out the study plan Mr. Geller had created and stared at it, feeling torn between two impossible choices: focus on his future or save his mother's life. He pulled out the newspaper and circled 3 night job listings: a gas station, a 24-hour diner, and a warehouse looking for overnight stalkers. The next morning, Mike arrived at school exhausted but determined. During his brief lunch break, he called the warehouse and arranged an interview for the following evening. As he hung up, Danny wheeled himself over to Mike's solitary table. Guess what? Danny announced, his face radiant. I got an A on my math quiz. First A I've ever gotten in math. Mike smiled, genuinely pleased despite his own troubles. That's great, Danny. I knew you could do it. It's because of you, Danny insisted. No one ever explained it so clearly before. He hesitated. Do you think, could we maybe study together sometimes? I mean, if you're not too busy. Before Mike could answer, he noticed Brad watching them from across the cafeteria. The football player's expression was calculating, predatory, like he was just waiting for the right moment to strike. Maybe, Mike said distractedly. I'll have to check my schedule. Later that afternoon, while checking the classifieds again during his cleaning shift, Ms. Martinez approached him in the empty hallway. Michael, do you have a moment? She was holding a folder emblazoned with the state university's logo. I've been looking into scholarship opportunities for you. There's one specifically for aspiring medical students from challenging backgrounds. Mike glanced at the application forms, noting the essay requirements and recommendation letters needed. The submission deadline was just a month away. Could he really catch up academically in time to submit a competitive application? This is for medicine, he said, tracing the university emblem with his finger. You mentioned that was your dream, correct? He nodded, not trusting his voice. It had been his dream for so long that he'd almost forgotten it still existed beneath the weight of his responsibilities. The scholarship covers full tuition, plus a stipend for books, Ms. Martinez continued. It's quite competitive, but I believe you have a compelling story and the academic potential to match. As Mike left the school that evening, head spinning with possibilities and obligations, he noticed Brad and several teammates gathered in the parking lot. When they spotted him, their conversation stopped abruptly. Brad whispered something to the others, who laughed in response. One made a throat-slitting gesture before they all piled into Brad's expensive SUV. Mike checked the security cameras with the school guard, discovering there was indeed a blind spot in the corridors, exactly where the items had disappeared. Meanwhile, Danny, using his crutches, discreetly followed Brad after school, watching him meet with other football players in the parking lot, their secretive body language suggesting they were plotting something. "Hey, Reynolds," Brad called out as he drove past. "Principal Wilson's looking for you. Seems some items disappeared from the teacher's lounge. Again." Mike stared at Brad's retreating SUV, the words echoing in his mind. More missing items. Another accusation. The fragile opportunity he'd been given was unraveling faster than he could hold it together. He found Principal Wilson waiting in the administrative office, his expression grim. The school secretary avoided Mike's eyes as she gestured toward the inner office door. "Mr. Reynolds, please sit down," Principal Wilson said, his earlier warmth replaced by professional detachment. "I'm afraid we have a situation." Mike lowered himself into the chair, the same one where just days ago he'd been offered a second chance. "Sir, whatever you've heard, a faculty tablet is missing from the teacher's lounge," Principal Wilson interrupted. "It was last seen yesterday afternoon. An anonymous witness reported seeing you leaving the lounge carrying something under your jacket." "That's not true," Mike protested, his heart racing. "I was cleaning in there, yes, but I didn't take anything." Principal Wilson's face remained impassive. "The witness was quite specific, Michael, and given your access to all areas of the school, you think I stole it because I'm the janitor," Mike said flatly. "I think," Principal Wilson said carefully, "that you had opportunity, and that the timing of these thefts coinciding with your return to classes is unfortunate." Mike leaned forward. "Sir, I wouldn't risk everything you've given me for a tablet. My mother's treatment, my chance at a scholarship. Why would I throw that away?" Principal Wilson sighed, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. "I believed in you, Michael. I stuck my neck out for you. I'm deeply disappointed." Those words cut deeper than any accusation. Principal Wilson had been the first authority figure in years to see Mike as something more than just a janitor, more than just a kid who'd had to grow up too fast. "It wasn't me," Mike repeated, his voice hollow. "Until this matter is resolved, I'm suspending you from both school and work," Principal Wilson said, sliding an official letter across the desk. "This means your scholarship application will also be put on hold." Mike stared at the paper, the words blurring before his eyes. "How am I supposed to pay for my mom's treatment?" "That's not the school's responsibility," Principal Wilson replied, though his tone had softened slightly. "I'm sorry, Michael, I truly am. But we need to follow protocol here." Mike stood, legs unsteady beneath him. "How long?" "The disciplinary committee meets next Friday. Until then, you're not to be on school grounds." A week. A week without income. A week falling further behind in classes. A week watching his mother grow weaker while the treatment that could save her became more unattainable. As Mike left the office in a daze, he nearly collided with Danny, who was waiting in the hallway, his crutches propped against the wall. "I heard what happened," Danny said, his voice low. "It wasn't you. I know it wasn't." Mike glanced around to ensure no one was listening. "Doesn't matter what you believe. Without this job, without the scholarship, I can't pay for my mom's treatment." Danny's face crumpled with genuine concern. "There has to be something we can do." "There isn't," Mike said, his voice sharper than he intended. Seeing Danny's hurt expression, he softened his tone. "I appreciate the vote of confidence, but some battles can't be won, Danny. This is one of them." "You stood up for me when no one else would," Danny insisted. "Let me help you now." Mike shook his head. "Stay out of it. Brad and his friends, they're not people you want to cross. But if Brad's behind this, then he's already won," Mike interrupted. "Go back to class, Danny. Forget about me." He walked away, ignoring Danny's calls to wait. The cold November air hit him as he pushed through the front doors, a fitting complement to the numbness spreading through his chest. Students scattered across the lawn stared as he passed. The janitor student who'd just been escorted out of the building, another piece of gossip, to text their friends about. Mike drove to the hospital on autopilot, his mind cycling through increasingly desperate options. The night job at the warehouse wouldn't be enough. He could sell his car, but they needed it for hospital trips. Maybe he could find 2 jobs working day and night, sleeping in his car between shifts. He found his mother asleep in her hospital room, an IV dripping steadily into her arm. She looked impossibly fragile, her skin nearly translucent against the white sheets. The sight of her, fighting so hard, never complaining, broke something inside him. Mike slumped into the chair beside her bed and, for the first time in years, he cried. He must have fallen asleep because when he opened his eyes, his mother was watching him, concern etched on her tired face. "Michael, what's wrong?" He hadn't planned to tell her. She had enough to worry about without carrying his burdens too. But sitting there, under her knowing gaze, the truth spilled out. Everything from the confrontation with Brad, to the scholarship opportunity, to the false accusations and suspension. "Oh, Mike," she whispered when he finished, tears sliding down her hollow cheeks. "You've been carrying all this alone. Why didn't you tell me?" "You're fighting cancer, Mom," he said. "My problems shouldn't be your concern." She reached for his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "I'm still your mother. That doesn't stop because I'm sick." She studied his face. "You've gotten so thin. Are you even eating properly?" Mike managed to smile. "Shouldn't I be asking you that?" "I made you carry the world on your shoulders, Mike," she said, ignoring his attempt at humor. "I was so focused on my treatment that I didn't see what it was doing to you." "You didn't make me do anything," he insisted. "I wanted to help. I still do." She squeezed his hand. "You've always been the strong one. Like when your father left, you were just a child, but you stepped up, became the man of the house." Her eyes grew distant. "Sometimes I wonder if I robbed you of your childhood." "You gave me purpose," Mike corrected her, "and I'm going to fix this situation, somehow." The next day, Mike searched online for any job that would hire him immediately. He applied to 7 positions, from night security to warehouse work to fast food restaurants. 2 called back for interviews, but when they learned he couldn't start for at least a week due to his suspension, their interest cooled. Mike was staring at his laptop screen, calculating how long their meager savings would last, when the doorbell rang. Opening the front door, he found Danny on the porch, breathless as if he'd rushed the entire way. "I know who took the tablet," Danny announced without preamble, extending a small flash drive toward Mike. "I installed a camera program on my phone after Brad started messing with my locker. I caught him planting the tablet in your supply closet yesterday." Mike stared at him in disbelief. "You did what?" "Here, look," Danny insisted, pushing past Mike into the apartment. He made his way to the kitchen table where Mike's laptop sat open. "Can I?" Too stunned to object, Mike nodded. Danny inserted the flash drive and opened a video file. The footage was slightly grainy but unmistakable. Brad Thompson, looking furtively over his shoulder before entering the maintenance closet with what appeared to be the missing tablet. The timestamp showed it was taken the previous afternoon, minutes before Mike's shift would have started. "Danny," Mike breathed, "you're a genius." "I know," Danny said with uncharacteristic confidence. "Now we need to show this to Principal Wilson." "Wait," Mike said, reality crashing back. "How did you get this footage? Did you follow Brad?" Danny looked slightly abashed. "Kind of. I've been tracking his movements since you got suspended. I wrote an app that alerts me whenever he enters certain areas of the school, like your maintenance closet, by piggybacking on the school's Wi-Fi signals. That sound possibly illegal?" "Only slightly," Danny admitted. "But so is framing someone for theft. And I didn't hack anything, just used publicly available network information." Mike ran a hand through his hair, mind racing. "If we show this to Principal Wilson, Brad's finished. But his dad is a bully just like Brad," Danny finished. "So what? Are you going to let them win?" That afternoon, they showed the recording to Principal Wilson and the police. Brad, cornered by the evidence, broke down in the principal's office. He admitted that his father had been putting intense pressure on him to secure an athletic scholarship, threatening to cut him off if he failed. When Mike emerged as academic competition for some of the same scholarships Brad had been counting on, his father suggested he take care of the problem. "My dad said colleges love a redemption story," Brad explained through tears. "A star athlete who overcame academic challenges. But Reynolds was making me look bad by comparison." "So you decided to frame him for theft?" Principal Wilson asked, his voice hard. Brad nodded miserably. "Dad said if I couldn't beat him fairly, I should make sure he got eliminated another way." The police officer in the room, a stern-faced woman who'd been taking notes, looked up. "We'll need to speak with your father as well." As Brad was led away to wait for his parents, Principal Wilson turned to Mike and Danny. "Michael, I owe you an apology. I should have had more faith in you." "You were doing your job, sir," Mike said, though the words tasted bitter. "Your suspension is lifted, effective immediately," Principal Wilson continued. "And I think we can find additional maintenance hours for you to make up for lost wages." Mike nodded, relief washing over him. "Thank you, sir." After the meeting concluded, Mike walked Danny to his father's waiting car outside. "I can't believe you risked getting in trouble with your spy app just to help me." Danny shrugged. "You risked your job for me. Seemed fair to return the favor." "Well, I owe you big time. You can repay me by acing those scholarship applications," Danny said, grinning. "The world needs more doctors who actually care about people." That night, alone at home while his mother remained hospitalized, Mike sat at the kitchen table staring at the pile of medical bills and scholarship applications. The weight of everything, his mother's illness, the precariousness of their financial situation, the mountain he still had to climb academically, pressed down on him. For the first time in years, Mike Reynolds cried until he had no tears left. Mike sat at his kitchen table, the crumpled suspension letter lying before him like a death sentence. The harsh fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting shifting shadows across the bills scattered around him. He stared at the official school letterhead, the words "temporary suspension" seeming to pulse with malicious intent. He'd been so close, so damn close to turning things around. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone, pulling up Principal Wilson's contact information. He'd explain again, make the man understand that he couldn't possibly have stolen anything, that his entire future, his mother's life, depended on this job. The call went straight to voicemail. Mike left a message, his voice cracking as he pleaded his case to an unfeeling digital recorder. Sleep came in fitful bursts that night, his dreams filled with beeping hospital monitors and his mother's face growing paler by the second. He woke before dawn, his neck stiff from dozing in the uncomfortable hospital chair beside his mother's bed. The rhythmic sound of her breathing offered the only comfort in the sterile room. A nurse entered quietly, checking vitals with practiced efficiency. When she finished, she gestured for Mike to join her in the hallway. Dr. Patel would like to speak with you, she said, her expression carefully neutral. The doctor was waiting at the nurse's station, clipboard in hand. His face bore the compassionate but detached expression that medical professionals perfect over years of delivering difficult news. "Michael," he began, "your mother's latest tests show the cancer is advancing more aggressively than we'd hoped. Without the experimental treatment we discussed, her chances are—" He paused, searching for the gentlest words. "Significantly reduced." Mike leaned against the wall, legs suddenly unsteady. "How long do we have to decide about the treatment?" "Ideally, we should begin within 2 weeks for optimal results," Dr. Patel replied. "I understand there are financial considerations. I've submitted a request to the hospital's financial assistance program, but I must warn you that funds are limited and there's a waiting list." 2 weeks. 2 weeks to somehow find $3,000 while suspended from his only job. Mike thanked the doctor mechanically and returned to his mother's room, watching her sleep. The gentle rise and fall of her chest seemed more precious than ever. Back home, Mike surveyed the small apartment with new eyes. What could he sell? His laptop was outdated but necessary for job applications. The television was ancient, worth maybe $50 at a pawn shop. His mother's jewelry, what little hadn't already been sold, might fetch a couple hundred. Nowhere near enough. He went to his bedroom and pulled his science textbooks from the shelf, carefully stacking them in a box. The dream had been nice while it lasted. No point hanging on to reminders of what couldn't be. As he lifted his chemistry book, a business card fluttered to the floor, Mr. Geller's contact information, with a handwritten note. "Call any time. I mean it." Mike stared at it for a long moment before returning it to the shelf. Some problems couldn't be solved by well-meaning teachers. The phone rang, startling him. It was Danny, asking if he could visit. "I don't think that's a good idea," Mike said. "Please," Danny insisted. "I might have a way to help, but I need to show you in person." Mike reluctantly agreed, giving Danny his address. An hour later, the doorbell rang. When Mike opened the door, he found Danny maneuvering his wheelchair up the small step with determined effort, a heavy backpack balanced precariously on his lap. "Sorry about the steps," Mike said, helping Danny navigate into the apartment. "Place wasn't exactly built for accessibility." "I've seen worse," Danny replied cheerfully, wheeling himself to the kitchen table. He unzipped his backpack, revealing a laptop and several electronic devices Mike didn't recognize. "I think I can prove Brad framed you." Mike stared at the array of equipment. "What is all this?" Danny's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "So after everything that happened, I figured Brad would try something else. He's too arrogant not to. I created an app that monitors the school's security system." "You hacked the school security?" Mike asked, alarmed. "No." "Well, not exactly," Danny amended. "I created a program that piggybacks on the existing system. It doesn't interfere with anything, just lets me set up alerts for certain locations, like your maintenance closet." Mike shook his head in disbelief. "How did you even learn to do this stuff?" Danny shrugged. "I've been coding since I was 9. When you can't play sports, you find other ways to keep busy." He opened his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. "I've been tracking Brad's movements through the school. Yesterday, my program alerted me when he entered the custodial area during lunch period. And I remotely activated the camera on my tablet, which I'd hidden near your supply closet that morning." "Look," Danny said, turning the screen toward Mike. The video showed Brad looking furtively over his shoulder before entering the maintenance closet. The timestamp matched exactly when the tablet had reportedly gone missing. "This is incredible," Mike breathed. "But also possibly illegal. We can't just submit this as evidence." "Why not? It proves you're innocent." "Because you can't just set up unauthorized surveillance in school, Danny. We could both get in serious trouble." Danny's face fell. I was just trying to help. Mike softened. I know, and I appreciate it. But we need to be smart about this. They were interrupted by a knock at the door. Mike opened it to find Ms. Martinez standing on his porch, her expression concerned. "May I come in?" she asked. "I wanted to check on you." Mike hesitated, then stepped aside. Ms. Martinez entered, raising an eyebrow at the sight of Danny and his electronic setup. "Hello, Daniel," she said. "I didn't expect to see you here." Danny quickly closed his laptop. "Just helping Mike with some computer stuff." Ms. Martinez seemed unconvinced, but didn't press the issue. She turned to Mike. "I don't believe for a second that you stole anything. Neither does Mr. Geller." "Thanks," Mike said, "but Principal Wilson's made up his mind." "Principal Wilson is under pressure from certain parents," Ms. Martinez replied carefully. "But that doesn't mean this situation can't be resolved." She glanced at the stack of medical bills on the table. "Michael, are things really that dire financially?" Mike hesitated, then nodded. "Mom needs an experimental treatment that insurance won't cover. Without my job at school, there's no way we can afford it." Ms. Martinez sat down at the table, her expression determined. "Give me a week. Don't do anything drastic. I may be able to help." "A week might be too late," Mike said. "Just trust me," she insisted. "And in the meantime, keep working on those scholarship applications. This setback doesn't have to derail your future." After she left, Danny looked at Mike expectantly. "So now what?" "Now I need to find a job that pays $3,000 in 2 weeks, Mike said grimly. Danny frowned. "That's impossible unless you rob a bank." "Not helping, Danny." "Sorry," Danny mumbled, "but I'm not giving up on clearing your name. Brad can't just get away with this." Mike spent the next day visiting the hospital again, then applying for every job he could find online. His phone buzzed with a notification from a warehouse hiring manager, offering an interview the following morning. The pay was decent, but nowhere near enough to cover the treatment costs in time. When he returned to the hospital that evening, he was surprised to find his mother awake and alert, sitting up in bed. She smiled when she saw him, patting the edge of the bed for him to sit. "You look terrible," she said, reaching up to smooth his disheveled hair. "When was the last time you slept properly?" "I'm fine," Mike insisted, taking her hand. "How are you feeling?" "Better today," she said, though the dark circles under her eyes belied her words. "The nurse told me you've been here every day. You shouldn't neglect your studies for me." Mike looked away. "About that, there's something I need to tell you." He hadn't intended to burden her with his problems, but as she watched him with those knowing eyes, the truth came tumbling out. He told her everything. The confrontation with Brad, the scholarship opportunity, the false accusations, and now the suspension that threatened not just his education, but her treatment as well. When he finished, his mother was silent for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. "All this time," she whispered, "you've been fighting this battle alone." "You have enough to worry about," Mike said. She squeezed his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "I'm still your mother, Michael. Your struggles are my struggles, even if I can't fix them for you. I'm going to figure this out," he promised. "I'll get another job, maybe 2. Whatever it takes." His mother searched his face. "You look so much like him sometimes," she said softly. Mike stiffened. "I'm nothing like Dad." "No, you're not," she agreed. "You're loyal and steadfast, in ways he never was. But you have his determination, the good parts of him that I fell in love with, before he abandoned us," Mike finished. She nodded sadly. "You sacrificed too much for me, Michael. Promise me something." "Anything. Promise you'll fight for your future, not just for my present, no matter what happens to me." "Mom, promise me," she insisted. Mike swallowed hard. "I promise." He left the hospital with her words echoing in his mind, the weight of his promise hanging heavy on his shoulders. As he unlocked his car, his phone vibrated with a text message from Danny. As Mike left the hospital, his phone vibrated with a message from Danny. "Consegui! Gravei Brad confessando tudo para seus amigos. Venha para minha casa agora." Mike ran all the way to Danny's house, his heart pounding with equal parts hope and disbelief. He'd parked 3 blocks away because his hands were shaking too much to drive safely. When he reached the modest 2-story home, he barely had time to catch his breath before ringing the doorbell. Danny opened the door, his face flushed with excitement. "Come in. You're not going to believe what I got." Mike followed Danny through the living room, where Mr. Foster gave him a curious nod, and into Danny's bedroom. The space looked like a miniature tech lab, multiple monitors, a desktop computer humming quietly, and walls covered with programming posters and robotics competition certificates. "Sit," Danny commanded, wheeling himself to his desk with practiced ease. Mike perched on the edge of the bed, watching as Danny inserted the flash drive and pulled up a video file. "How did you manage this?" "After they framed you, I started recording everything," Danny explained, adjusting the volume. "I had a feeling Brad would brag about it eventually." The footage began playing. It showed the boys' locker room after practice. Brad was lounging on a bench, surrounded by 3 teammates. The image was slightly grainy, but the audio was crystal clear. "Reynolds is history," Brad was saying, his voice smug. "Principal had no choice once I planted that tablet in his closet." "Wasn't that risky?" one teammate asked. "What if someone saw you?" Brad snorted. "Who pays attention to what happens in the janitor's closet? Besides, my dad knows people on the school board. Even if Reynolds somehow proves he didn't take it, he's still screwed." "Your dad know about this?" another boy asked. "It was his idea," Brad replied with a shrug. "He said Reynolds was making me look bad academically. Said if I couldn't beat him fair and square, I should eliminate the competition." Mike stared at the screen, a mixture of vindication and anger churning in his stomach. "This is it. This proves everything." "We need to take it straight to Principal Wilson," Danny said, ejecting the flash drive and handing it to Mike. Mike turned the small device over in his palm. "How did you record this without them noticing?" Danny grinned. "Remember when I told you I was into programming? I developed an app that activates my phone's camera when it detects specific voice patterns, like Brad's. Left my phone in my gym bag by the bench. They never even noticed." "You're a genius," Mike said, genuine admiration in his voice. "I know," Danny replied, his smile widening. "Now, are we going to nail this jerk or what?" The next morning, Mike and Danny arrived at Westridge High together. Despite being officially suspended, Mike walked through the front doors with his head held high. Several students stopped to stare, whispering behind their hands as they passed. "Ignore them," Danny advised. "In about an hour, they'll all be talking about Brad instead." They found Ms. Martinez in the hallway and quickly explained what they had. She immediately escorted them to Principal Wilson's office, bypassing his secretary with a determined, "It's urgent." Principal Wilson looked up from his desk, his expression hardening when he saw Mike. "Mr. Reynolds, you're aware you've been suspended pending—" "Sir, with respect, you need to see this," Ms. Martinez interrupted, nodding at Danny to play the video. As the recording played, Principal Wilson's face cycled through disbelief, shock, and then anger. When it finished, he sat back in his chair, removing his glasses to pinch the bridge of his nose. "Where did you get this?" Danny explained his app, carefully framing it as a personal project rather than an intentional surveillance operation. Principal Wilson listened without interruption, his expression grave. "This is concerning," he said finally. "Very concerning. If what Mr. Thompson says is true, then we have a much bigger problem than missing items." He reached for his phone. "Patricia, Please call Officer Ramirez and ask her to come to the school immediately. Then locate Brad Thompson and bring him to my office." While they waited, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. Finally, Principal Wilson addressed Mike. "I owe you an apology, Mr. Reynolds. I should have given you the benefit of the doubt." Mike nodded stiffly, not quite ready to forgive. "What happens now?" "Now, we get to the bottom of this," Principal Wilson replied. "All of it." 20 minutes later, a police officer arrived, followed shortly by Brad. The football star's confident smile faltered when he saw Mike and Danny already seated in the office. "What's going on?" Brad asked, his voice rising slightly when he noticed the officer. "Why is she here?" Principal Wilson gestured for Brad to sit. "Mr. Thompson, we have evidence suggesting you falsely accused Mr. Reynolds of theft. Would you care to explain?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Brad said, but his face had gone pale. "Perhaps this will refresh your memory," Principal Wilson said quietly, nodding to Danny to play the video again. As Brad watched himself on the screen, the color drained completely from his face. When his own voice declared it was his idea, referring to his father, Brad slumped in his chair. That's taken out of context," he stammered. "Is it?" Officer Ramirez asked, speaking for the first time. "Because it sounds like a confession to filing a false report and tampering with evidence, both of which are crimes, Mr. Thompson." Brad's eyes darted around the room, seeking escape. Finding none, his shoulders sagged. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he said, his voice barely audible. "Dad just said to make sure Reynolds couldn't compete for the scholarships. He said colleges love comeback stories, star athletes overcoming academic challenges. But with Reynolds' grades improving so fast..." "So you decided to frame him for theft," Principal Wilson finished. Brad nodded miserably. "Dad said if I couldn't beat him fairly, I should make sure he got eliminated another way." Officer Ramirez's expression hardened. "We'll need to speak with your father as well." "No!" Brad's head snapped up, panic in his eyes. "You don't understand. He'll kill me if he finds out I got caught. He's already threatening to cut me off if I don't get that athletic scholarship." "That's not my concern," Officer Ramirez replied. "You committed a crime, possibly at your father's direction. That makes him a person of interest." Principal Wilson picked up his phone. "Patricia, please call Mr. Thompson and ask him to come to the school immediately. Inform him it's regarding a serious disciplinary matter involving Brad." Brad seemed to shrink in his chair, his usual bravado completely evaporated. For the first time, Mike saw beyond the facade of the privileged bully to the scared kid beneath. A boy terrified of disappointing his father, willing to destroy someone else's future to save his own. While they waited for Mr. Thompson to arrive, Principal Wilson turned to Mike. "Mr. Reynolds, your suspension is lifted, effective immediately. You may return to your classes and your work schedule. The school will compensate you for the days you missed." "Thank you, sir," Mike said, relief washing over him. "Furthermore," Principal Wilson continued, "I believe we should revisit your scholarship applications. This situation has only confirmed what Ms. Martinez and Mr. Geller have been telling me about your character and potential." A commotion outside the office interrupted them. Robert Thompson's voice carried through the door, loud and demanding. "I don't care what disciplinary matter you're talking about. My son is the star quarterback. Whatever happened, I'm sure it's been blown out of proportion." The door burst open, and Robert Thompson strode in, his expensive suit and commanding presence filling the small office. He faltered momentarily at the sight of Officer Ramirez, then quickly recovered. "What's going on here?" he demanded. "Why is there a police officer speaking with my son without my presence?" "Mr. Thompson," Principal Wilson began, rising from his chair, "please have a seat. We have a rather serious situation to discuss." "I'll stand, thank you," Thompson replied coldly. His eyes swept the room, narrowing when they landed on Mike. "What's he doing here?" Isn't this the janitor who was suspended for stealing? Actually, Officer Ramirez interjected, that's why I'm here. It appears your son falsely accused Mr. Reynolds of theft. We have video evidence of him not only admitting to planting the stolen items, but also claiming it was your idea. Thompson's face reddened. That's preposterous. My son would never... Dad, Brad interrupted, his voice small. They have it on video. Me talking in the locker room. Thompson stared at his son, momentary shock giving way to controlled anger. We'll discuss this at home, he said through clenched teeth. I'm afraid it's not that simple, Officer Ramirez said. Filing a false police report is a criminal offense, as is tampering with evidence. And if you directed your son to do this, that adds another layer of complexity. Are you accusing me of something, officer? Thompson's voice was dangerous now. Not yet, she replied evenly, but I would like you to come to the station to answer some questions. Thompson's laugh was without humor. Do you have any idea who I am? Who my friends are in this town? I donate more to the Police Benevolent Fund than you make in a year. Mr. Thompson, Principal Wilson interjected, I understand you're upset, but threats won't help this situation. Thompson turned his cold gaze to the principal. This isn't a threat, Wilson. It's a reminder of reality. My family's name is on your science wing. My donations funded your football field. If my son faces any serious consequences over this misunderstanding, I'll be forced to reconsider my financial support of Westridge High. The room fell silent. Mike watched Principal Wilson's face, seeing the exact moment when Principal collided with pragmatism. The school relied heavily on donations from families like the Thompsons. Could Wilson really afford to stand firm when the school's budget hung in the balance? Mike couldn't stay silent any longer. So that's it? Brad frames me for theft, nearly destroys my future and my mother's chance at treatment, and he gets away with it because his dad writes big checks? Mr. Reynolds, Principal Wilson began, but Mike wasn't finished. What lesson does that teach, sir? That money matters more than justice? That rules only apply to some people? Mike stood up, looking directly at Principal Wilson. Are you going to let the money talk louder than justice, Principal Wilson? Principal Wilson, with a determined expression after a moment of hesitation, said, Mr. Thompson, I understand your concern, but perhaps it would be better if we discuss this in person, with your son, Mr. Reynolds, and the police present, since we're dealing with a case of theft and falsification of evidence. Mr. Thompson's face flushed crimson, his jaw clenching as he stared at Principal Wilson in disbelief. Are you actually suggesting I'm involved in some sort of criminal conspiracy over school property? His voice rose with each word, filling the small office. I'm not suggesting anything, Principal Wilson replied calmly. I'm simply stating that we need to address this situation properly, with all parties present. Officer Ramirez stepped forward. Mr. Thompson, no one is accusing you of anything at this point, but we do need to investigate the theft and your son's statements about your involvement. This is absurd! Thompson slammed his fist on the desk. Do you have any idea what one phone call from me could do to your careers? Mike watched the exchange, anger building in his chest. This was the system he'd been fighting against his entire life, the one where money and connections trumped truth and justice. A system that had kept him cleaning floors while people like Brad sailed through life on their family name. That sounded remarkably like a threat, Mr. Thompson, Officer Ramirez noted, her voice cool. Would you like to rephrase that? The tension in the room was broken by a soft knock at the door. Ms. Martinez entered, followed by several teachers, including Mr. Geller. Excuse the interruption, Ms. Martinez said, but we felt our presence might be relevant to this discussion. She handed Principal Wilson a folder. These are testimonials from faculty members regarding both Michael's character and previous incidents involving Brad that were never formally addressed. Mr. Thompson scoffed. This is becoming a circus. My attorney will have a field day with this coordinated ambush. Dad, please, Brad said, his voice barely audible. Just stop. Be quiet, his father snapped. You've done enough damage already. Principal Wilson cleared his throat. Mr. Thompson, while I value your contributions to this school, I cannot and will not allow them to influence disciplinary matters. Brad has admitted to framing another student, which is grounds for immediate suspension, possibly expulsion. If you expel my son, I'll withdraw every cent of funding, Thompson threatened. That new library wing you've been planning? Gone. The technology upgrade for the science labs? Canceled. Before Principal Wilson could respond, Mike's phone rang. He glanced at the screen. The hospital. His heart dropped. I need to take this, he said, stepping out of the office. The call was brief but devastating. His mother had suffered a severe reaction to her current treatment. The doctors needed authorization to begin the experimental protocol immediately, which meant the payment would be due in full by the end of the week. When Mike returned to the office, his face was ashen. The argument had escalated in his absence, with Thompson now on the phone with someone he repeatedly referred to as Councilman. Everything okay? Danny whispered as Mike slid back into his seat. Mike shook his head slightly. Mom's worse. They need to start the new treatment now. Officer Ramirez, overhearing this, turned to Mike. Does this mean you need to leave? I should, but... Mike gestured at the ongoing confrontation. His future, his ability to pay for his mother's treatment, still hung in the balance of this meeting. Principal Wilson had apparently reached his limit. That's enough, Mr. Thompson. Regardless of your financial contributions or political connections, here's what's going to happen. Brad will be suspended for 2 weeks. He will write a formal apology to Mr. Reynolds, and he will perform community service for the remainder of the semester. This is outrageous, Thompson sputtered. You can't possibly... I'm not finished, Principal Wilson continued firmly. The school will also be conducting a full review of Brad's academic record, given the allegations of pressure to maintain his athletic eligibility through inappropriate means. Brad looked up sharply. What does that mean? It means, Mr. Geller interjected, that several teachers have noted suspicious patterns in your test results. Answers that match exactly with other students. Essays that show dramatic improvements in style and content from one assignment to the next. Are you accusing my son of cheating now too? Thompson demanded. We're investigating possibilities, Principal Wilson replied. And yes, this may impact Brad's athletic eligibility and scholarship opportunities. Thompson's face contorted with rage. You'll regret this, Wilson. Every single one of you will. He grabbed Brad's arm. We're leaving. My attorney will contact you. Actually, sir, Officer Ramirez stepped between Thompson and the door. I still need to take Brad's statement regarding the theft and false accusation, and I'd like you to come to the station as well. This is harassment, Thompson hissed. No, sir. This is procedure. As Officer Ramirez escorted Brad and his father out, the office fell silent. Mike sat motionless, overwhelmed by the confrontation and his mother's worsening condition. Principal Wilson sighed heavily. I apologize you had to witness that, Michael. Rest assured, your position here is secure, both as a student and an employee. Thank you, Mike managed, but I need to get to the hospital. My mother... Go, Miss Martinez said immediately. We'll sort everything out here. Mr. Geller stepped forward. Michael, I'll email you the assignments and notes from today's classes. Don't worry about falling behind. Mike nodded gratefully and hurried out. As he rushed through the parking lot, he heard someone calling his name. Turning, he saw Brad's mother, Elizabeth Thompson, approaching from her luxury SUV. Mrs. Thompson, Mike said cautiously. I'm sorry, but I really need to... Please, just one moment, she said. Unlike her husband's commanding presence, Elizabeth Thompson spoke softly, almost timidly. I overheard about your mother. Mike shifted uncomfortably. I really have to get to the hospital. Of course, she nodded. I just wanted to say, my husband doesn't speak for our entire family. What Brad did to you was wrong. Inexcusable. Thank you for saying that, Mike replied, uncertain where this was going. My husband's behavior, she continued, her voice faltering slightly. It's how he's always dealt with problems, throwing money or threats at them until they disappear. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. This is my personal cell number. When you have a moment, please call me. I'd like to discuss your mother's treatment options. Mike stared at the card. Mrs. Thompson, I appreciate the gesture, but Robert doesn't know I'm here, she interrupted, and he doesn't control all our family's resources despite what he believes. She pressed the card into Mike's hand. Just call me, please. At the hospital, Mike found his mother's condition had stabilized, but the doctors were insistent. Without the experimental treatment, her prognosis was grim. The financial counselor was sympathetic but firm. They needed at least half the payment before treatment could begin. We can give you until the end of the week, she explained. After that, we'll have to release the medication slot to another patient. That night, Mike sat in the hospital cafeteria, staring at Elizabeth Thompson's card. What could she possibly want? Was this some elaborate scheme orchestrated by her husband to buy Mike's silence? Or was she genuinely trying to help? His phone buzzed with a text from Danny. How's your mom? Everyone at school is talking about what happened. Brad's dad is furious. Mike managed a small smile. Despite everything, it felt good to have someone checking on him. He was typing a response when another text came through, this one from Ms. Martinez. When you can, please call me. I've been speaking with the scholarship committee. Your situation may qualify for emergency consideration. The following morning, Mike returned to school, expecting awkward stares and whispers. What he found instead surprised him. Several teachers stopped him in the hallway to express their support. A group of students he barely knew invited him to sit with them at lunch. Even the maintenance staff, who had previously kept their distance, welcomed him with newfound respect. During his afternoon cleaning shift, Mike found Danny waiting by his cart. Any news about your mom? Danny asked. Same, Mike sighed. They can stabilize her with the current treatment, but without the experimental protocol. He couldn't finish the sentence. What about that scholarship Ms. Martinez mentioned? Could that help? Maybe, but not in time. The committee meets monthly, and the funds wouldn't be dispersed until next semester. Danny frowned. There has to be something. Reynolds! They both turned to see Brad approaching alone, his usual swagger replaced by an uncomfortable hesitance. What do you want? Mike asked warily. Brad glanced at Danny, then back to Mike. Can we talk? Alone? Danny rolled his eyes. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of me. Brad sighed. Fine, I wanted to apologize. For real, not the fake one the school is making me write. Mike crossed his arms. Why should I believe you? You shouldn't, Brad admitted. I've been a complete ass. To both of you. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that made him look younger, more vulnerable. My dad's been suspended from his firm pending an investigation. Turns out, the police found some other questionable things when they started looking into him. I'm sorry to hear that, Mike said, surprised to find he meant it. No, you're not, Brad said with a bitter laugh. And you shouldn't be. He deserves it. Just like I deserved getting suspended. An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Finally, Brad spoke again. My mom told me she talked to you about your mom's treatment. Mike tensed. She did. You should call her, Brad said. She means it. Whatever she offered, it's real. He hesitated, then added, My mom had cancer too when I was 12. She knows what it's like. As Brad walked away, Danny looked at Mike incredulously. What was that about? What did his mom offer you? I'm not sure, Mike replied, watching Brad's retreating figure. but I think I need to find out. That evening, after visiting his mother, Mike finally called the number on Elizabeth Thompson's card. She answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Thompson, it's Mike Reynolds." "Michael, thank you for calling," she replied, her voice warm. "I've been thinking about your situation. Robert may not want to hear this, but perhaps I can make something right out of this terrible situation." Mike listened in growing disbelief as Elizabeth explained her proposal. By the time the call ended, he sat motionless, staring at his phone. A text from Danny broke his trance. "Any updates?" Mike typed back, "You won't believe what just happened." Mr. Thompson looked at Mike with initial anger that transformed into a thoughtful expression before saying something unexpected. "Perhaps you're right, and perhaps I can do something about your mother's treatment, as a gesture of apology." Mike shifted uncomfortably in the plush leather chair that seemed designed to swallow visitors whole. The Thompson estate's home office was larger than his entire apartment, lined with dark mahogany bookshelves and adorned with framed certificates and awards. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he could see an immaculately maintained garden where a gardener was meticulously trimming hedges into perfect geometric shapes. "I appreciate you coming, Michael," Mr. Thompson said, his tone measured as he settled behind an imposing desk. Gone was the thunderous rage from their confrontation at school, replaced by something Mike found even more unsettling: calculated civility. "Your wife said it was important," Mike replied, keeping his voice neutral. He still wasn't entirely sure why he'd agreed to this meeting. After Elizabeth Thompson's surprising phone call, curiosity had gotten the better of him. Mr. Thompson nodded, steepling his fingers. "My wife can be persuasive." He cleared his throat. "What I'm about to tell you stays in this room. Understood?" Mike tensed, but nodded. "My wife, Elizabeth, lost her sister to cancer when they were teenagers," Thompson began, his voice softening almost imperceptibly. "It shaped her life, drove her decision to establish the Thompson Family Cancer Fund." Mike blinked in surprise. He'd never heard of such a fund. "We keep it private," Thompson continued, as if reading Mike's thoughts. "Elizabeth prefers to help people directly rather than attract publicity." He paused. "But that's not the only reason I asked you here." Thompson pulled a photograph from his desk drawer and slid it across the surface. It showed a younger version of himself with a woman who had to be Brad's mother. Between them stood a frail-looking woman in a hospital gown, her head wrapped in a scarf. "My wife, the mother of my son, died of ovarian cancer when Brad was 12, Thompson said, and for the first time Mike caught a glimpse of genuine emotion cracking through the man's polished exterior. "Despite all my money, all my connections, I couldn't save her." Mike stared at the photograph, unsure how to respond. This vulnerability from the man who had threatened his future seemed impossible to reconcile with the tyrant he'd encountered at school. "I'm sorry for your loss," Mike said finally, meaning it. Thompson reclaimed the photograph, tucking it carefully back into the drawer. "Elizabeth tells me your mother needs an experimental treatment, one that insurance won't cover." "That's right. The foundation can help with that," Thompson said matter-of-factly. "Elizabeth has already made the arrangements. The hospital will receive payment in full by tomorrow morning." Mike felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath him. "Why would you do that? After everything that happened?" Thompson's expression hardened slightly. "Make no mistake, Reynolds. I'm not happy about how events unfolded at the school. My son's future has been compromised, my reputation questioned." He leaned forward. "But Elizabeth made a compelling case. And perhaps I recognize something in your situation that resonates with me." Mike struggled against his pride. Accept help from the man who had tried to destroy his future, the man whose son had tormented him and others. But his mother's life hung in the balance. Pride wouldn't pay for her treatment. I don't know what to say, Mike admitted. Say nothing, Thompson replied. This isn't charity. Consider it a balancing of accounts. Later that day at the hospital, Mike received confirmation that the treatment would begin immediately. The financial counselor seemed as surprised as Mike by the sudden payment, but didn't ask questions as she processed the paperwork. His mother was sitting up in bed when he entered her room, her complexion noticeably brighter than it had been in weeks. The doctors were just in, she said, smiling. They told me about the new treatment. Michael, how did you manage this? Mike took her hand, still processing the morning's events himself. It's a long story, he said. The important thing is that you're getting the best possible care now. She studied his face. There's something you're not telling me. It can wait, he assured her. Right now, all that matters is you getting better. The following day, Mike returned to school with a lightness he hadn't felt in years. As he walked the hallways between classes, he noticed students looking at him differently. Some nodded respectfully, others smiled. The invisibility he'd once cultivated had been replaced by something unexpected: recognition. In chemistry class, Mr. Geller handed back their most recent tests. When Mike received his paper, he stared at the grade in disbelief. 94%. Excellent work, Michael, Mr. Geller said with a smile. Your improvement has been, remarkable. After class, the teacher gestured for Mike to stay behind. I wanted to discuss your tutoring sessions, he said once the other students had filed out. I've got a proposition for you. Mike expected to hear that their extra sessions would be reduced now that his grades had improved. Instead, Mr. Geller surprised him. I'd like to offer you a position as a peer tutor for the science department, he explained. We'd pay you the same hourly rate as your custodial work, but you'd be helping other students instead of cleaning floors. Really? Mike asked, stunned by the offer. You think I'm qualified? You've demonstrated exceptional understanding of the material, and you have a natural ability to explain complex concepts, Mr. Geller replied. Plus, I've seen how you work with Danny Foster. You have patience, something many tutors lack. Mike thought about it for only a moment. I'd like that very much, sir. During lunch, Mike headed to the library where he'd arranged to meet Danny. He found the younger boy already waiting, his laptop open to display complex lines of code. What's all this? Mike asked, setting down his tray. Danny grinned. I'm designing an app for students with mobility issues like mine. It maps the most accessible routes through the school and tracks when elevators are out of service. That's incredible, Mike said, genuinely impressed. How did you learn to do all this? Self-taught, mostly, Danny replied with a shrug. When you can't play sports, you find other ways to keep busy. They spent the lunch hour discussing Danny's programming projects, with Mike occasionally offering suggestions for making the app more user-friendly. Their conversation was interrupted when a shadow fell across their table. Hey, Brad said awkwardly, standing alone without his usual entourage of teammates. Can I talk to you guys for a minute? Danny glanced at Mike, who nodded slightly. What's up, Brad? Brad slid into an empty chair, looking profoundly uncomfortable. I just wanted to say thanks, he said, addressing Mike, for whatever you said to my dad. He's different since your meeting. I didn't say anything special, Mike replied truthfully. Well, something changed, Brad insisted. He actually apologized to me last night. Like a real apology. I don't think he's ever done that before. An uncomfortable silence settled between them. Finally, Danny spoke up. So, are you still grounded for all eternity? He asked, his tone lighter than Mike expected. Brad managed a small smile. Pretty much. No car, no phone except for emergencies, mandatory community service every weekend. Dad says if I want to prove I'm more than just his name and money, I need to earn my way back. Sounds fair, Mike said. Brad nodded, then hesitated before continuing. Also, I wanted you to know I withdrew my application for the Miller Science Scholarship. You deserve it more than I do." Before Mike could respond, Brad stood and walked away, leaving them both staring after him in surprise. "Did that just happen?" Danny asked. "I think it did," Mike replied, equally stunned. That afternoon, Mike had his first session as a peer tutor instead of doing his custodial shift. The experience was transformative, explaining chemical equations and biological processes to struggling students gave him a sense of purpose he'd never felt while mopping floors. By the end of the session, he knew he'd found his calling. He visited his mother after school, finding her sitting in a chair by the window rather than confined to bed. The doctors had begun the new treatment protocol, and while it was too early for definitive results, her energy levels had already improved. "You look better," Mike said, kissing her cheek. "I feel better," she replied, squeezing his hand. "Dr. Patel says my initial response to the treatment is encouraging." They talked about small things: the spring flowers visible from her window, a funny story about her favorite nurse, the book she was reading to pass the time. It felt normal, almost peaceful, a stark contrast to the tension and fear that had dominated their interactions for months. As Mike was preparing to leave, his mother caught his hand. "Michael, I know something significant happened to make this treatment possible. When you're ready to tell me about it, I'll listen." "I will," he promised. "Soon." The following days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Mike divided his time between classes, tutoring sessions, and hospital visits. His grades continued to improve as the burden of constant exhaustion and worry lifted from his shoulders. Ms. Martinez worked with him on scholarship applications, helping him craft essays that captured his unique journey. During a study session in the library, Mike was surprised when a group of students he barely knew asked to join his table. Among them was Sarah Chen, a quiet girl from his advanced biology class who had never spoken to him before. "We're working on Geller's enzyme lab," she explained. "Danny mentioned you're the person to ask about catalytic reactions." Mike looked across the library to where Danny sat with his computer science club, the younger boy giving him a thumbs up and a grin. Apparently, Danny had been singing Mike's praises to anyone who would listen. "Sure," Mike said, making room at the table. "Let me see what you got so far." What began as a simple study session evolved into a regular group meeting. By the third week, Mike was unofficially tutoring a half-dozen students, most of whom had previously ignored his existence when he was just the janitor. One evening, as Mike was leaving the hospital after visiting his mother, he spotted Brad sitting alone in the waiting area, head bowed. "Brad?" Mike approached cautiously. "Everything okay?" Brad looked up, momentarily startled. "Oh, hey, yeah, I'm good. Just finished my volunteer hours for the day." "You're volunteering at the hospital?" Brad nodded. "Delivering flowers, pushing wheelchairs, that kind of thing. It was Elizabeth's idea, my stepmom. She thought it might give me some perspective." "Is it working?" Mike asked. Brad considered the question seriously. "Yeah, I think it is. It's hard to feel sorry for yourself when you're surrounded by people fighting real battles, you know?" Mike understood perfectly. As he was driving home, Mike's phone vibrated with a message from Ms. Martinez. "Need to see you urgently tomorrow. The scholarship committee wants to interview you, and I've discovered something about your father that you need to know." Mike's footsteps echoed through the empty corridor as he approached Ms. Martinez's office. The note she'd left in his locker yesterday had been cryptic, but urgent. "Need to see you tomorrow morning. Important information about your scholarship and your father." His father. Mike hadn't heard that word without a bitter taste rising in his mouth for years. What could Ms. Martinez possibly know about the man who had walked out on them when Mike was 10, leaving nothing but unpaid bills and broken promises? He knocked softly on the counselor's door. "Come in, Michael," Ms. Martinez called. She was seated behind her desk, an old manila folder placed prominently before her. Her expression was gentle but serious, as Mike took the chair opposite her. "Thank you for coming early," she said. "I wanted to speak with you privately before classes begin." Mike nodded, eyeing the folder. "Your message mentioned my father?" Ms. Martinez placed her hand on the folder, as if weighing whether to open it. "I knew your father, Michael," she revealed softly. "I worked as a nurse at Memorial Hospital before becoming a school counselor, the same hospital where he was completing his residency." Mike stared at her, the information hitting him like a physical blow. "You knew my father. Why are you just telling me this now?" "I wasn't sure it was my place," she admitted. "But with your scholarship interview approaching, I felt you should be prepared. The committee will ask about your influences for choosing medicine." She opened the folder and removed a faded photograph. Mike's breath caught as he recognized his father, younger, smiling broadly in a white coat, surrounded by other medical residents. His mother stood beside him, her arm around his waist, radiantly happy. "This was taken at his graduation ceremony," Ms. Martinez explained. "He was brilliant, Michael. One of the most promising young doctors I'd ever seen." Mike struggled to reconcile this image with the man who had abandoned them, who had chosen drugs over his family. If he was so brilliant, why did he throw it all away? Ms. Martinez sighed, extracting more documents from the folder. "The demands of residency are brutal. 80-hour weeks, constant pressure, life and death decisions made on too little sleep." She slid an old hospital ID card toward Mike. "Your father started taking prescription stimulants to stay awake during long shifts, then painkillers for the migraines that followed." Mike picked up the ID card, studying the face that looked so much like his own reflection. "So he became an addict." "It happened gradually," Ms. Martinez said. "By the time anyone realized how dependent he'd become, he was already in trouble with the medical board for writing his own prescriptions." She showed Mike a series of documents, disciplinary hearings, mandated treatment programs, a final license revocation. The story of his father's downfall, laid out in clinical, bureaucratic language. "Why are you telling me this?" Mike asked, pushing the papers away. "He left us. Whatever happened to him after that?" "He tried to get clean, Michael, multiple times." Ms. Martinez pulled out one last document, a letter addressed to her, dated 3 years ago. "This was the last contact I had with him. He asked about you and your mother." Mike's hand trembled slightly as he took the letter. His father's handwriting was eerily familiar, a ghost from his childhood. "Dear Maria," it began, "I know I have no right to ask, but if you're still in touch with Claire and Michael, would you tell me how they're doing? I've been sober for 18 months now. Not looking for forgiveness, just want to know they're okay." Mike set the letter down, emotions warring within him. Anger, confusion, a strange, unwelcome flicker of something that might have been hope. Why would he contact you instead of us directly? "He was afraid you wouldn't want to hear from him," Ms. Martinez replied. "And perhaps he was right. But he never stopped caring, Michael. That counts for something, doesn't it?" Mike wasn't sure it counted for anything. Years of struggling, of watching his mother work herself to exhaustion, of taking on adult responsibilities while other kids played video games, all because his father had chosen addiction over family. "Why bring this up now?" he asked again, his voice tight. "Because the scholarship committee will ask about your medical inspiration, and you need to be prepared." Ms. Martinez leaned forward. "But also because I've seen how hard you fought to avoid becoming your father. Maybe it's time to consider that you might have inherited the good parts of him, too." Mike shook his head, struggling to process this new information. What good parts? The part that abandoned his family? The part that chose drugs over his own son? "The brilliance," Ms. Martinez said quietly. "The compassion he showed his patients. The determination that got him through medical school despite growing up in poverty, much like you're doing now." She paused. "And yes, even his mistakes offer lessons, You've seen firsthand the cost of those mistakes. That knowledge might make you a better doctor than he ever could have been." Mike sat in silence, staring at the photograph. His father's smile, so confident and full of promise. Had there been signs even then of the weakness that would ultimately destroy their family? "The committee interviews are Thursday," Ms. Martinez continued, giving Mike space to process. "They'll want to know what drives you to pursue medicine despite the hardships you faced. You don't have to mention your father if you don't want to. But don't let your fear of becoming him stop you from becoming yourself." Mike nodded slowly, gathering the scattered documents and returning them to Ms. Martinez. "Thank you for telling me. I need some time to think about all this." "Of course," she said, closing the folder. "And Michael, for what it's worth, I think you have all of your father's strengths and none of his weaknesses." He left her office in a daze, the morning sun streaming through the hallway windows. Classes wouldn't start for another 30 minutes. Mike found himself wandering toward the science wing, seeking the comfort of familiar territory. The lab was empty when he arrived, the morning light illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. Mike sat at his usual station, trying to reconcile the new information about his father with the narrative he'd constructed over the years. His father hadn't been a monster, just a flawed man who'd made devastating mistakes. Somehow, that felt harder to accept than the simpler story of abandonment Mike had told himself for years. Movement at the door caught his attention. Danny wheeled himself into the lab, surprise registering on his face when he spotted Mike. "You're here early," Danny observed, maneuvering his chair to Mike's table. "Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." In a way, Mike supposed he had. He hesitated, then found himself telling Danny about Ms. Martinez's revelations. Once he started talking, the words poured out: his father's promising career, the addiction, the abandonment, the letter from 3 years ago. Danny listened without interruption, his young face serious. When Mike finally fell silent, Danny considered his response carefully. "So your dad was a doctor who self-destructed under pressure," he summarized. "And you're afraid of following the same path." "Wouldn't you be?" Mike asked. "Maybe," Danny admitted. "But look at everything you've already handled. Working full-time while in high school, taking care of your mom, dealing with Brad and his dad, getting falsely accused of theft, all without turning to drugs or running away." Put that way, Mike had to admit he'd already faced pressures his father couldn't handle. "Besides," Danny continued thoughtfully, "maybe you inherited his talent for medicine but not his weaknesses. Like, I got my mom's eyes and my dad's brain for math. We don't have to become our parents entirely." The simplicity of Danny's perspective cut through Mike's tangled emotions. "When did you get so wise?" he asked with a small smile. Danny shrugged. "Spend enough time in hospitals, you either become philosophical or go crazy." The first bell rang, signaling 10 minutes until classes began. Students would start filtering in soon. "So what are you going to tell the scholarship committee?" Danny asked. "I don't know yet," Mike admitted. "The truth, I guess. About my mom, about working here, about wanting to help people." He paused. "Maybe about my dad, too. The complete picture, not just the abandonment." Danny nodded approvingly. "That sounds right. You don't have to pretend your dad never existed. Just show them how you're going to be different." The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Ms. Martinez helped Mike practice potential interview questions, while Mr. Geller coached him on how to discuss his scientific interests. Even Brad, in an unexpected gesture of support, offered tips on handling the committee members his father knew personally. The morning of the interview, Mike woke early, his mother's words from their last conversation echoing in his mind. "You are your own person, not your father's shadow." She'd listened patiently as he'd finally told her about Ms. Martinez's revelations, then shared her own stories, both good and bad, about the man she'd loved and lost to addiction. Mike dressed carefully in the suit Mr. Thompson had lent him, adjusting the tie with nervous fingers. The face that looked back at him from the mirror was undeniably similar to the one in his father's graduation photo. The same determined eyes, the same strong jawline. For the first time, the resemblance didn't fill him with dread. When he arrived at school, he found Mr. Geller, Ms. Martinez, and Danny waiting for him outside the conference room where the interviews would take place. "You've got this," Danny assured him. "Remember, they already know your grades and your circumstances," Ms. Martinez added. "This interview is about who you are as a person. And don't forget to breathe," Mr. Geller advised with a smile. "You know this material better than you think." Mike nodded gratefully, then stepped into the conference room where 5 committee members sat waiting. He introduced himself, shook hands, and took his seat, trying to project a confidence he didn't entirely feel. "So, Mr. Reynolds," began the chairwoman, "what inspires you to pursue medicine, given the significant obstacles you've faced?" Mike took a deep breath, thinking of his mother's courage, of Danny's resilience, of his own journey from invisible janitor to scholarship candidate. And yes, even of his father, both the brilliant doctor he'd once been and the cautionary tale he'd become. "The truth is," Mike began, "my path to medicine started with my father." Standing before the mirror wearing the borrowed suit from Mr. Thompson, Mike saw not just his reflection, but the image in the old photograph of his father at graduation. And the resemblance was so striking that for a moment he didn't know if he was looking at himself or the man who had abandoned him. Mike adjusted his tie nervously, staring at his reflection in the mirror. The suit Mr. Thompson had lent him fit surprisingly well, transforming him from the janitor he'd been for 2 years into someone he barely recognized. Someone who looked remarkably like the man in that old photograph. "You are your own person," he whispered to himself, recalling his mother's words, "not your father's shadow." Yet the resemblance was undeniable. The same determined set of the jaw, the same intensity in the eyes, even the way his hands moved as he straightened his collar. All echoes of a man who had abandoned them years ago, a brilliant doctor who had succumbed to his demons. For a moment, Mike couldn't tell if he was looking at himself or at the ghost of his father's potential. The thought both terrified and strangely comforted him. He had inherited his father's intelligence and aptitude for medicine. Perhaps he had also inherited the strength to overcome the challenges that had defeated his father. The sound of his phone ringing broke the spell. It was Danny. "Are you ready?" his friend asked without preamble. "The committee's already there. Ms. Martinez said they're running early." "I'm leaving now," Mike replied, taking one last look in the mirror before grabbing his folder of documents. "How's my mom?" "Nurse says she's having a good day. She's excited for you. Tell her I'll come straight to the hospital afterward." The drive to the school felt surreal. Just months ago, Mike had been nothing more than a shadow in these hallways, a janitor trying to remain invisible. Now he was arriving for an interview that could change his entire future. The scholarship committee had assembled in the conference room, 5 members seated at a long table, each with a copy of his application materials. Ms. Martinez waited outside, offering an encouraging smile as he approached. "Remember," she said, squeezing his arm, "they already know your grades and circumstances. This is about who you are, what drives you. Be honest." Mike nodded, took a deep breath, and entered the room. "Mr. Reynolds," the chairwoman greeted him, extending her hand. "I'm Dr. Eleanor Collins, head of the scholarship committee. Please have a seat." Mike shook hands with each committee member before sitting down, conscious of the weight of their collective scrutiny. These 5 people held his future in their hands. "So, Mr. Reynolds," Dr. Collins began, "what inspires you to pursue medicine given the significant obstacles you've faced?" The question hung in the air. Mike had rehearsed dozens of answers with Ms. Martinez, but suddenly none of them felt right. Instead, he found himself speaking from the heart. "The truth is," he began, "my path to medicine started with my father." He saw a surprise register on several faces and realized they had expected him to mention his mother's illness. "My father was a doctor, a brilliant one, from what I've learned. But he made choices that destroyed his career and our family. He abandoned us when I was 10. Mike paused, gathering his thoughts. "For years, I tried to be anything but him. Then my mother got sick, and I saw what good doctors could do, how they could ease suffering, bring hope when there seemed to be none. I realized medicine was in my blood, regardless of my father's failures." A committee member, an older gentleman with silver hair, leaned forward. "And you're not concerned about following in his footsteps? Medical school is extraordinarily demanding." "I'm concerned," Mike admitted, "but not deterred. I've seen the worst medicine can be through my father, and the best through the doctors treating my mother. I choose to aim for the latter." The questions continued for nearly an hour about his academic interests, his work experience, how he would balance college demands with family responsibilities. Mike answered each one thoughtfully, drawing on everything he'd learned during his unusual journey. Finally, Dr. Collins closed her folder. "One last question, Mr. Reynolds. Many applicants come to us with perfect grades and extensive extracurricular activities. What makes you different? Why should we invest in your future?" Mike considered the question carefully. "Most applicants haven't lived both sides of the medical experience," he said. "I've been the janitor cleaning hospital rooms and the terrified son sitting beside a sick parent. I've seen healthcare from every angle except the providers, and I'm ready to complete that circle." He paused, then continued with growing confidence. "You asked why you should invest in me, because I've already invested everything in getting this far. I've scrubbed floors to pay for my mother's treatment. I've studied between cleaning shifts. I've fought for every opportunity. I won't waste the chance you give me, because I know exactly what it costs." When the interview concluded, Mike stepped out into the hallway to find not only Ms. Martinez waiting, but Danny, Mr. Geller, and surprisingly, Brad as well. "How did it go?" Danny asked eagerly. "I think good," Mike replied, the tension of the past hour finally releasing. "I told them about my dad." Ms. Martinez nodded approvingly. "Sometimes the truth, however complicated, is more compelling than a polished story." "When will you hear back?" Brad asked. "They said 2 weeks," Mike replied, still surprised to find Brad among his supporters. "That's quick," Mr. Geller noted. "Usually these committees deliberate for a month or more." "Dr. Collins mentioned something about expediting decisions for exceptional candidates," Mike said, still processing everything that had happened. The group walked together to the parking lot, their conversation lighter now that the interview was over. As they reached Mike's car, Brad hung back slightly. "Hey, Reynolds," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Good luck, I mean it." "Thanks," Mike replied, genuinely appreciating the gesture from someone who had once been his tormentor. The 2 weeks that followed were among the busiest of Mike's life. He divided his time between his studies, his tutoring job, and visits to his mother, whose response to the experimental treatment continued to improve. Her doctors spoke cautiously of remission, though they warned the road ahead would still be challenging. During one afternoon tutoring session, Mike looked up to find Danny watching him with undisguised pride. "What?" Mike asked, self-conscious under his friend's gaze. "Nothing," Danny replied with a grin. "Just thinking about how far you've come, from cleaning these halls to teaching in them." Mike smiled, realizing the truth in those words. The corridors he had once navigated invisibly as a janitor had become the setting for his transformation. Every classroom, every hallway held memories of his journey. On the morning he expected to hear from the scholarship committee, Mike woke early, too anxious to sleep. He drove to school with his stomach in knots, checking his phone obsessively for emails or calls. As he entered the main hallway, he saw Principal Wilson standing by the administrative offices, waiting for him. "Mr. Reynolds," the principal called, "may I see you for a moment?" Mike followed him into his office, where he found Dr. Collins from the Scholarship Committee already seated. "Please sit down," Principal Wilson said, his expression giving nothing away. Dr. Collins held a large envelope in her hands. "Mr. Reynolds, the committee has reached a decision regarding your application." Mike sat perfectly still, afraid to even breathe. "Your story is quite remarkable," she continued. "In my 15 years on this committee, I've rarely encountered a candidate who has overcome such significant obstacles with such grace and determination." She extended the envelope toward him. "I'm pleased to inform you that you've been awarded the full scholarship to State University's pre-medical program. Congratulations." The words seemed to echo in Mike's ears as he reached for the envelope with trembling hands. "Thank you," he managed, his voice barely audible. "Thank you so much. You've earned this," Dr. Collins said firmly. The committee was unanimous in its decision. Mike left the office in a daze, the acceptance letter clutched in his hand. The first person he saw was Danny, waiting anxiously by the water fountain. "Well?" Danny demanded. Mike held up the envelope, a grin spreading across his face. "I got it." Danny's whoop of joy echoed down the hallway, drawing attention from passing students and teachers. Soon, Ms. Martinez and Mr. Geller joined them, followed by other teachers who had supported Mike's journey. "I have to tell my mom," Mike said, pulling out his phone. "Go," Ms. Martinez urged. "This news deserves to be delivered in person." At the hospital, Mike found his mother sitting up in a chair by the window, reading a magazine. She looked better than she had in months. Still thin, still pale, but with a spark in her eyes that had been missing for too long. "Michael!" she exclaimed, her face lighting up. "I wasn't expecting you until this evening." He knelt beside her chair, presenting the envelope. "I got it, Mom. Full scholarship to State University pre-med program." She took the letter with shaking hands, tears filling her eyes as she read. "Oh, Michael," she whispered, "I'm so proud of you. So very proud." That evening, Mike drove home with a lightness in his heart he hadn't felt in years. As he passed the school, he slowed down, looking at the building that had been the setting for so much of his journey. From invisible janitor to scholarship recipient in less than a year, it seemed almost impossible. 2 months later, Mike stood on the auditorium stage in his graduation cap and gown. Below him, his mother sat in a wheelchair in the front row, her face radiant with pride. Beside her, Danny gave him a thumbs up, beaming. Even Mr. and Mrs. Thompson were there, seated a few rows back, Brad between them looking slightly uncomfortable in his own graduation regalia. Principal Wilson handed Mike his diploma, along with the Special Recognition Award for student who overcame the greatest adversity. The applause that followed was deafening. At the podium, Mike adjusted the microphone and looked out at the crowd. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," he began, his voice steady and clear. "It's doing what's right even when you have everything to lose. I learned that from a true hero, Danny Foster." He continued, speaking about perseverance, about learning from mistakes, both his own and others, and about finding redemption in unexpected places. As he spoke, his eyes drifted to the back of the auditorium, where the custodial staff stood watching. He offered them a special thanks, acknowledging that they had been his colleagues and teachers in ways most students would never understand. After the ceremony, as families gathered in clusters to take photos, Brad approached Mike alone. "I won't ask you to forgive me," he said, looking at his feet. "But I want you to know that you changed something in me. I realized I've spent my entire life being exactly the kind of person I would hate if I were on the other side." Mike watched Brad walk away, then turned to his mother and Danny, who were waiting for him. "You know," he said to Danny as they walked toward the car, "for someone who spent his life cleaning the corridors of this school, I never imagined I would find my redemption in them." Danny smiled. "Maybe that's because you were too busy cleaning messes to notice you were leaving a shining path wherever you went."